We understand there have been explosions and interceptions throughout across Israel against these Iranian missiles and drones as they're being intercepted. So those are some of the pictures you're seeing on your screen now. Let's bring in Sean Bell. He's a military analyst and a retired Air Vice Marshal. He joins us live from Birmingham in the UK. Sean, thank you very much for being with us. Give us first your response then to this retaliation we're seeing tonight against Israel. And how surprised are you that Iran used a direct attack rather than its proxies? Because that's significant, isn't it?
Yeah, good evening, Darren. It is significant. I don't think many people are surprised. I think, as your correspondents quite rightly have been saying, you know, when Israel chose to mount an attack onto the consulate in Syria, the Iranian consulate, on the 1st of April, killing 13 people, including a senior military commander, that they must have expected there was going to be some sort of retaliation. I think what's been interesting, first of all, is how long it's taken for Iran to find the right response. And also, I think Iran finds itself on the horns of a dilemma. As many of your previous correspondents have been saying, Iran does not want to get involved in a war, but it has to protect its reputation. And it certainly doesn't want to see any retaliation as being an excuse for Israel and potentially America to start attacking Iran, particularly its nuclear weapons program, because ultimately it's not if, it's when Iran finally develops nuclear weapons. That will be the ultimate deterrent for nations like Israel and the US, and it will not want to see those get lost. So I don't think anybody's surprised at the level of the attack. I think what we're all looking for at the moment is whether or not they are military targets, maybe government targets, whether there have been telephone warnings to advise to try and minimize the number of casualties, and whether or not actually this is a single wave of attacks. I think what's other thing you're seeing on your pictures, though, I would remind viewers that at the moment, the Iron Dome and systems like that are only really useful against drones. And it does seem to be that Iran has coordinated a series of attacks, potentially even Hamas firing rockets, but certainly Hezbollah firing rockets, and with the Houthis also attacking in the Red Sea. This is a very, very well coordinated series of attacks by Iran, trying to make a clear point to Israel.
Yeah, Sean, let's just stick with the issue of the drones. What do we know then about these Shahed drones that are now coming in over Israel and being intercepted? I mean, their range, their speed, their warheads, their payloads, etc. Because we know that they've also been used by the Russians in the war with Ukraine.
Yes, I mean, from a military perspective, they're not that capable. I mean, they're about the same speed as a car. They do about up to 140 miles an hour. They have got long endurance. They can travel hundreds of miles, and they can be quite carefully programmed. They've got a relatively small warhead, 50 kilograms, but that will still do a lot of damage on the ground. But they're really more terror weapons than anything else. The huge advantage is that these things are probably only about $20,000 a time, whereas most of the cruise and ballistic missiles, you're talking about $1 million, $2 million a time. So the great thing about drones is that you can afford quantity, and sort of quantity has a quality all of its own, because you can actually start to deluge air defenses, and that's what these weapons are trying to do. They're a terror weapon more than actually physically be able to do material damage, but they are, as you said, very widely being used out in by the Russians against Ukraine targets, because it forces air defense systems to operate against them, sucking up expensive air defense missiles, and therefore creating potentially the pathway through for cruise missiles and the ballistic missiles, which are much more expensive, travel a lot faster, a lot more capable, but obviously are limited supplies and very expensive.
Yeah, let's just get a final thought from you, Sean, and stay with that issue of the Iranian strategy here. You were saying it's to overwhelm, is it to overwhelm Israel's multi-layered air defense system, and by using other aerial assets like missiles, cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, in effect, the attack itself is multi-layered as well?
The attack will certainly be multi-layered. I mean, there's no point firing one missile and having it shot down out of the sky by the very careful, very high-tech Israel air defense systems. That would appear that Iran was not strong. It wouldn't be seen as a robust response. So it would have to have considered a multi-wave attack. But Iran would have been well aware that most of the drones will get shot down. It's more a question of where the main missile strikes are. But my overwhelming sense of this, though, is that Israel must have known when it attacked that consulate on the 1st of April that there would trigger some sort of response like this. And despite America asking Iran for a measured response, telling them not to respond, Iran probably had no choice. So the real question is, what was Israel seeking to achieve with those attacks on the 1st of April? And is this part of a carefully coordinated plan? Because Israel's made no secret of the fact that having dealt with Hamas, it wanted to deal with Hezbollah next. And this attack by Iran might well give Israel license to have a go after Hezbollah next.
All right, Sean Bell, live for us there from Birmingham in the UK. Sean Bell, a military analyst and retired Air Vice Marshal. Thank you very much indeed for your time and your analysis. Let's go back to Rory Challens. He joins us live from occupied East Jerusalem. Rory, so just talk us through now what you're seeing and hearing. You're there in occupied East Jerusalem. You've been hearing these explosions, seeing these interceptions. Tell us what you're seeing. Tell us a bit more, Rory.
Well, there have been extraordinary scenes, I have to say, over the skies of Jerusalem this evening. Just a half an hour ago, it looks calm now. It is calm. But just 30 or so minutes ago, the sky behind me was lit up with, well, I mean, what looked from here like slow-moving fireworks arching into the sky, which were interceptors launched by Israeli air defense all around the city, rising up to meet the threat of Iranian drones coming in, perhaps cruise missiles. We don't know exactly what the targets up in the sky were. But this is unprecedented, an Iranian drone and missile attack coming into the main cities of Israel, and an attack from Iran on Israeli territory itself, of the launching of dozens, if not hundreds, of drones. We understand that several waves have been launched from Iran, and it's possible that what I saw in the skies just a few minutes ago was only the first of those waves coming in. There might well be more. The Israeli government is saying that the battle is not over. What he was meaning by that, the Israeli spokesperson, government spokesperson, was that Israel is going to be launching its own response. So lots of questions, because we are in uncharted territory at the moment. Those questions are, how many more of these projectiles, missiles and drones launched from Iran, launched from Hezbollah, launched from the Houthis, are going to be making their way to Israel? How many of them are going to be getting through? We understand at the moment we only know of one actual ground detonation down in the Negev deserts, injuring a Bedouin boy. What is Israel's response going to be? These are the big questions that are going to be answered only as we go through the night and then into the days to come.
Yeah, Rory, you touched briefly there on a possible target there near the Negev desert. Is there any indication yet as to what the targets are and where these drones and missiles might be landing? And presumably, I mean, they won't be going for civilian targets.
Well, that's the assumption, but it can't be a given, because, as we've seen, there have been targets seemingly selected in Jerusalem itself, or at least the drones or the missiles were passing over here and being intercepted over here. So we can't assume that civilian targets haven't been chosen. It is more likely that the Iranians are going for military targets. That, I think, is the main assumption from the Israeli military planners and from the Americans who've been assisting them in their overwatch, in their intelligence, in their electronic warfare, and also with planes up in the skies, not just over Israel itself, but over Jordan and around the region, trying to intercept these threats as they come in. We understand that the British have had planes up as well, and the French has been assisting with its navy. So Israel has assistance from various parties, various countries and allies. It's had assistance from the Jordanians as well, who've been shooting down these drones as they've been passing over. It seems, for the moment, like the threat is being dealt with, but no air defence system is 100%, and there will always be things that get through.
Rory, just a final thought to you. I mean, you're saying now that things have calmed down somewhat there where you are in occupied East Jerusalem. What is the Israeli public, Rory, being told? I mean, we know that schools have been closed, the airport's closed, air raid shelters have been reopened. How are ordinary citizens being prepared as the country's on high alert?
Well, the country's been waiting for this for more than a week. So I think everyone has sort of accepted that something is coming, something has been imminent, and they have been told various things that they should do, various things that they shouldn't do by the government. They've been told not to panic because governments are always very keen to avoid that kind of hysteria breaking out on the streets with people running hither and thither and causing all sorts of chaos. They didn't want that to happen, but they did want people to have the knowledge of where the nearest air raid shelter was, and to make sure that it wasn't locked or that the pathway to it wasn't obstructed, those kinds of things. But then, of course, the government has been putting into place, as this attack seems to be getting more and more imminent, this evening, the government put into place these extra restrictions on gathering people, gathering in crowds more than 1,000. That disrupted an anti-government protest that was taking place in Tel Aviv earlier on this evening. And schools, as you say, are being shut for the next 2 days. Daycare, universities, any kind of educational establishment are basically shutting its doors, doing any kind of teaching online. These are the kinds of things that the Israeli public have been told to prepare for, and the rules that they have to obey.
All right, Rory Challen's live for us there in occupied East Jerusalem. Rory, thank you. And for those viewers who are just joining us now, we're seeing some earlier pictures there of those Iranian drones being intercepted over various parts of Israel. Those are the pictures that you're seeing on your screen now. Rory's been telling us that there have been interceptions across Israel tonight. So they're just some of the earlier pictures. But Rory was telling us there from occupied East Jerusalem that it seems to have quietened down, certainly in Jerusalem for now. That may be just the fact that it's the first of many waves. But for now, Rory is saying the threat seems to have dissipated over Jerusalem. Let's bring in Hamda Salut. She's in Tel Aviv and was earlier at an anti-government rally there. Hamda, events have moved swiftly tonight, haven't they, with this Iranian response? We came to you earlier and you were telling us about explosions and interceptions with the air defense system. What are you seeing and hearing now, Hamda?
Well, now it is seeming like this has passed at least the first wave of it, but the Israelis have said that this is not over. There were initial reports in the evening of a second and third wave of fleets of drones that were also launched. The Israeli Iron Dome missile defense system, the David Sling, the Arrow, all of them in use this evening, but primarily across the occupied territories. We saw in occupied East Jerusalem, where our colleague Rory Challen was, where the sirens were blaring out, but the sirens, in fact, were all over Israel, and the explosions and interceptions within the sky were quite prominent everywhere you look. Now, Israeli planes are also buzzing and roaring overhead, and that's because the Israeli Army spokesperson, Daniel Hagari, had said that there will be multiple types of mechanisms that they will use for air defense, and that includes fighter jets. But it was interesting to see some of these interceptors and some of these drones and missiles potentially coming in from all different directions, some of them coming in from the sea, which we have never seen before, especially in conflicts with Israel. And when it comes to Lebanon, when it comes to Gaza, we've never seen these type of projectiles or interceptors come from the direction of the sea heading south. Now, the Israelis have said that they have had new mechanisms, not only for intercepting, but also saying that they are going to respond and that they have new capabilities and measures for whatever that response is going to be against the Iranians. While the Iranians have said that their mission is now over, that is simply not the case for the Israelis, who have been essentially bracing for this impact since April 1st, since those Israeli airstrikes hit the Iranian consulate in Damascus on April 1st. They said it was a red line. The Israelis never even admitted to striking the Iranian consulate. I will remind you, they typically never comment on their military activity in Syria. You can hear those fighter jets still roaring above us as we speak. But the Israelis have said that they're no longer just on the defensive, that they're actively pursuing enemy targets wherever they are, whether it's Beirut, whether it's Damascus, whether it's anywhere else in the Middle East, and that could mean Iran. Now, there are several places throughout Israel that the Israelis are saying that people should continue to shelter in place. There are some things flying in the sky here. We believe there are F-16 fighter jets, but that is additionally because the Israeli army said that fighter jets would be in the skies of Israel for the entirety of the evening while the airspace was closed as part of their air defense mechanisms. The Israeli army says they were prepared for a wide variety of scenarios, prepared for anything that might come. And the continuation we see of activity in the sky here in Tel Aviv as the Israelis perhaps bracing for something else that is next. While it has been calm for perhaps the last 20 minutes, this is a developing situation. This is an unprecedented situation that has never happened before. We have never seen an attack of this size and scale with quite sophisticated weaponry that have come into Israeli airspace. So the Israelis say they are prepared for a wide variety of scenarios, and while they have issued new types of restrictions, new types of measures, the Home Front Command that is part of the Israeli army saying that there are going to be no large gatherings, schools, daycares, kindergartens, certain types of workplaces would be closed for the next 2 days as they're bracing for perhaps potentially not just what happened this evening, but perhaps also bracing for more. The Israeli army has said from the beginning of the Israel-Hamas war that they knew something else could happen. There's still an active front on Israel's northern border with Hezbollah. They say there is an active front in the southernmost city of Eilat with other types of drones and missiles that have been launched there specifically by the Houthis in Yemen. And the Israelis say they are prepared to open up all fronts in the war if they are attacked. And that is seemingly going to be the case, as they say they are going to retaliate against the Iranians for the launch of more than 100 drones and missiles that have been intercepted all over the country tonight.
Yeah, you're in Tel Aviv, Hamda. Are you getting a sense yet of the targets of these drones and missiles, where they're landing, where they're being intercepted, and so on?
It's a little bit hard to say because there are military bases all over the country. Israel's defense ministry, the Kidia, is in the heart of Tel Aviv. There were reports speculating that that could potentially be a target, but there were more reports from anonymous Israeli officials indicating that the targets would be primarily military targets. And what exactly that means, whether it's air bases, whether it's Iron Dome or air defense battery systems, whether it is artillery positions, perhaps it's unknown what exactly was being targeted. But the Israeli defense array in the air has intercepted seemingly most of those projectiles. We haven't really had any reports yet of them falling in any sort of open areas. We haven't had reports of damage. There are reports of one injury in the southern part of the country, a 10-year-old child in a Bedouin area. These areas typically do not have these types of bomb shelters or safe rooms that are located in other sorts of Israeli towns and homes that are easily accessible and available. So the Israelis say that while perhaps this part of the evening is over, but the longer game for them is going to be a retaliation. And look, it's still unknown if this part specifically is over. It's unknown if there will be this second and third wave of launches from Iran that was reported that Israeli officials are still perhaps bracing for. But they say, again, that they are prepared for any possible scenario.
All right, Hamda, salute live for us there in Tel Aviv. Hamda, thank you. Well, as we mentioned, US President Joe Biden has cut a weekend trip short and has returned to Washington, D.C. to consult with his national security team. Let's bring in Heidi Jo Castro. She joins us live from Washington, D.C. So we know that security meeting, Heidi, at the White House has already started. Who's in that meeting and what kind of response then are we likely to expect from Washington? I mean, US officials knew this was coming.
Absolutely. And Biden rushed to the White House today prior to the announcement of the rest of the world learning that Iran had launched these drones. So he did have some heads up, and he is continuing to meet with his National Security Council, which includes the U.S. Secretaries of Defense and of State, the director of the CIA, the National Intelligence Director, the National Security Advisor, just a list of who's the top U.S. officials who say they are working in close coordination with their Israeli counterparts in directing the way that the U.S. is supporting Israel's defense against this Iranian attack. And we just got a statement from a senior U.S. defense official saying that the U.S. will continue to shoot down Iranian-launched drones that have been targeting Israel. So a confirmation that the U.S. has indeed been taking down these Iranian drones. Meanwhile, a spokeswoman for the National Security Council, again, used this word we've heard over and over again coming from the Biden White House, ironclad, to describe the level of support that the U.S. has for Israel's security. And though we're not getting much more detail about what assets the U.S. is deploying to take down these drones and other incoming projectiles from Iran, we are getting some clues from a British official saying that British air jets are now replacing some of the U.S. fighters that have been doing counterterrorism work in Iraq and Syria in order to free up those U.S. fighter jets to now support Israel. In total, there are still tens of thousands of U.S. troops who are deployed in this region, I should remind us. And there's another 1,000 U.S. troops that are en route to the coast of Gaza there to build a humanitarian pier to receive the delivery of food there. But the Pentagon has been moving to even beef up more the presence of U.S. troops in this region, not to mention the USS Eisenhower carrier group, which includes 2 destroyers as well as 9 Air Force squadrons that have all been placed there waiting in anticipation for this moment to arrive. Again, we're not exactly clear which assets were used to take down these Iranian drones, but that response continues as we speak.
Yeah, Heidi, let's just go back to President Biden, because there's some speculation that he knew about this attack. What sort of behind-the-scenes diplomatic warnings or intelligence led Biden to believe that the response would be sooner rather than later?
He certainly hinted at that. He said there was intelligence that he knew of but couldn't get into publicly yesterday when he said those words exactly, that this attack would be coming sooner rather than later. And he told Iran at that time, this was about 24 hours ago now, don't do it. Well, obviously, that advice was disregarded by Iran. But behind the scenes, the U.S. has been, over the last 10 days or so, really ramping up diplomatic pressure, trying to avoid this very moment from occurring, using pressure on third-party countries to try to pressure Iran to back down from its threat. But the fact that this is taking place came as a surprise to no one, given that the U.S. had intelligence that this would be occurring and the many clues and the telegraphing that Iran gave that this moment would arrive.
All right, Heidi Castro live for us there in Washington, D.C. Heidi, thank you.